Welcome to the People Leader Accelerator podcast. I'm executive coach Jess Yuen, joined by my co-host, the co-founder and managing partner of People Leader Accelerator, Andrew Bartlow. On this show, we dive deep with business and HR leaders to uncover what really works when it comes to building high-performing organizations, navigating leadership challenges, and making better management decisions. Whether you're the first people leader at a startup or a seasoned executive at a company with scale, you'll find practical insights you can apply right away. For show notes and free bonus resources, visit peopleleaderaccelerator.com/podcast. And if you're looking for hands-on support from developing your leaders to creating a high-performance culture to hiring the right people, visit us at peopleleaderaccelerator.com. We'd love to help. Let's get into today's episode.
Really appreciate you being willing to chat with us. I wanted to bring that to our audience of mid to senior level HR leaders. How do we contribute? How is what we're working on in people programs and initiatives tied to driving more revenue or the product getting out the door? And that's often to an audience that doesn't really understand how we tick and how we can contribute. So I really appreciate you being willing to speak with us. You have been deeply involved in the people tech community for a long time. You've been HR adjacent in many ways and tech native in many ways. And you created the first People Leader Accelerator website and our logo and our branding. And so you are truly part of the genesis story of PLA. And so now full circle, we have a venue here and you're on it. And thank you so much for being part of it. And I really did not realize until just a few minutes ago that you and Jess had never met.
I know, it's so crazy. I kind of feel like Robin and I know each other because we've been adjacent in these circles for so long. So it's a pleasure to finally be able to directly be chatting with you. And in preparation for this, I was going through your LinkedIn and your website and going through your backstory. I watched the YouTube video about the café that you bought and later subsequently sold after 3 years of turning it around. And there's just so many aspects to you that are fantastic. And I can't wait to dive in, including you worked with BJ Fogg, who does a lot of behavioral change. Dance is a big part of your life as well. And so talking about both for how storytelling applies for HR leaders was the original impetus where Andrew and I were super excited to talk to you, but I'm sure some of these other facets will come up through our conversation as well.
Very sweet. No, this is such a joy. It's fun. You both mentioned sort of these what I think of as professional dilettante elements of my life. We all have so many multifaceted components. And what I've essentially come to is, without being inauthentic, it's who are we trying to talk to and what are the stories we're trying to share to achieve the thing that we want, right? So dance and HR don't have a lot in common for me in my life. HR and Zander Media, I'm just a fan of, everybody I know who is in HR. There are a lot of professional dilettantes, people who did not grow up. There's very few traditional routes to becoming an HR professional. All of my favorite CPOs, CHROs are people who found their way. All of us know Marie in common, right, as a staff member and a co-producer of People Leader Accelerator. Marie was a professional musician long before she was an HR executive. We all have these multiple facets. The best of people in the world pull from one domain of expertise, very David Epstein's range, pull from one domain and apply it into another. Pulling from one domain that is personal to me and contextualizing it so it's personal to the other person to foster connection, which then means we can move together in the same direction. That's so much of what executives and leaders need to do, is to coalition build, is to generate momentum, to not just say we're going to move in this direction, but to generate the case for why people should move in that direction.
Connection. Well, we in HR often spend a lot of time and energy talking about connection and relationships. I might take a slightly different spin on it about alignment and clarity helps organizations and teams move faster.
Yep.
And so telling the story about what are we trying to accomplish together, what are the key things that it takes to get there, can help organizations, put grease in the wheels instead of sand, can move together, as you said, more rapidly. Would love to give you the opportunity to tee it up for the audience. Not everybody knows the full journey. We've alluded to many elements and there's a lot to touch on, but maybe you could share your points of credibility about why they should listen to you about how to storytell?
I mean, I think that when it comes to storytelling, the thing to do is to practice more than to listen to anybody. In terms of my experience, I've been a full-time entrepreneur for 15 years. My very first business was at 5 years old, selling pumpkins throughout the neighborhood, building coalitions of the local boys to dress up in scarecrow costumes and flag down passing cars to buy Robin's pumpkins. This will be fun. Let's dress up and market for my pumpkins. And that first year made $500 from selling pumpkins. And like nothing I will ever do.
Quite the haul for how many pumpkins were you selling?
A lot. Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of pumpkins. I don't think I will ever be as successful as I was at 6 years old selling $500 worth of pumpkins in a season. I walked into a gymnastics gym at 19 and discovered a love of movement and gymnastics, went on to have a career as a gymnast, performed as an acrobat with the San Francisco Opera for a season. As you said, Jess, in 2016, bought used restaurant equipment and opened up Robin's Café in the Mission District in San Francisco with no prior restaurant experience. Started it on 3 weeks' notice in time to feed attendees of a conference I was putting on alongside BJ Fogg on this intersection of dance and behavior change. You know, that was the connection. It was housed within a dance studio. I had been a dancer then professionally for many years. And I lived in that neighborhood for 10 years and knew that that neighborhood was changing and that that specific corner would benefit from a coffee shop. It's still around today. It's still called Robin's Café. The folks I sold it to in 2019, who I met via Craigslist, still run it today, and credit where due. They have run it many years longer than I ever did. But it was very much a testing ground for me. It was the first time I had full-time employees of my own. It taught me a lot about, as we're saying, coalition building, generating momentum across a team, getting all of the different stakeholders of a business and of an ecosystem to buy into a common vision and work hard towards that common vision. And when I sold the cafe, realized I had made a mistake. I had a oh shoot moment 3 weeks after selling the restaurant. And it wasn't that I wish I had kept the restaurant. I've never regretted leaving that business, but that I didn't do enough storytelling. Because if I could show you the video in this moment of the first time my nephew walked in and his eyes got big because his big uncle Robin owned a soft serve machine, or if I could show you the stories of all of the customers who developed a deep rapport with my baristas because I did a good enough job developing a sense of community behind the counter that my baristas were able to develop this community with our customers, and our customers grew the community, and thus Robin's Cafe was successful. Those are the videos that would have been great marketing for Robin's Cafe. And I was so busy cleaning espresso drains and hiring and firing baristas that I was not able to take the time. I was so busy running the business that I did not do the storytelling that would have catapulted Robin's Cafe, while successful already, to the next level. And I said, okay, whatever I go and do next, I want to make sure I have the capacity to storytell where people pay attention right now, which is always changing, on the platforms where people are existing, which will always continue to change. Let me go figure out storytelling. Let me go figure out messaging and content building. And so that's what became Zander Media. And we're a small but mighty team today, kind of distributed around the US, and mostly do narrative strategy and video production.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit more. So Zander Media has been around for how long now? And
2018.
So we're at 7-8 years at this point. And I know that you have done a lot of work with venture-backed tech companies and a lot of work with HR teams who are trying to tell their story to candidates and tell their story internally to these high growth organizations. And so, boy, talk about getting the reps and then going deep in the storytelling. Like, that's one of the things I love about People Leader Accelerator. I think of myself as a generalist where I can talk a decent amount about a lot of different topics, but we're able to connect with true world-class experts in a subject matter. And that's what I think you are in terms of storytelling in this space, in startup land, in the HR land. I would love for our listeners to be able to come away with some golden nuggets about how to do this inside their organizations more effectively.
Yeah. And I love how you're drawing the connection between this idea of connecting with others and alignment, and that being able to allow organizations to move faster. And that storytelling is this really powerful form of connection. If we might start with something super basic, what is a good story? I've worked with a lot of executive clients where they're like, I think I need to get better at storytelling. Like they just sort of have this sense like it's a skill I need to know, but they don't really need to know the why. And I think we're unpacking a bit of that. But then the next question is naturally like, where do I start with that if I want to get better at it? And so maybe if we just start with what is a story? What makes a good one?
Totally. There's lots and lots of frameworks, and we'll talk about a couple of different frameworks. But ultimately, frameworks are condensed out of what humans already do. Humans want to be educated, they want to be entertained, they want attention, they want to continue paying attention because otherwise, they're drifting off and looking at TikTok. We've all heard about The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell, which depending on the read has something like 17 steps. Dan Harmon's 8-part story structure. It's another version of The Hero's Journey. But any story kind of has 3 parts. It has a departure, a challenge, and a return. I like to think of story in 4 parts, and I'll give a couple of examples. I had a conversation with a Pixar animator named Bobby Podesta. He gave me this story, but it just works so well. So Steve Jobs was launching the second iPod. I think it was the iPod Nano. And he's spending, this big long buildup talking about why Apple is well positioned for the iPod Nano. You can find this YouTube video from back in the day. And he's saying, Apple owns this percentage of the market, and here how our competitors in the MP3 space are doing compared to our first iPod. And now we're getting ready to introduce something new. And here he had the option of doing 2 different things. He could just pull out the new device and say, here it is. But instead, he paused and he was like, I have a question. I've always wondered what that little pocket on jeans, the little pocket on jeans that holds coins, it's like coin sized. I've always wondered what that's for. Do you know what that's for? Well, here at Apple, we've just discovered what that's for. Out of that little pocket pulls out the iPod Nano. And he's like, introducing the second iPod in the Apple family. It's the size of a quarter. Here is the new device. And that moment, that twist or reveal, which we can call the turning, is a moment of entertainment and disruption that can make or break a story. It makes it memorable. It brings it to a pause that's really exciting. If I were to say, I was running Robin's Café, I wanted to do more marketing, now I'm running Zander Media. It's like, kind of falls flat. It's like, sure, okay, but no one's going to remember that. It's not interesting. If I say, I was running Robin's Café, I wanted to do more marketing, so I sold my cafe on Craigslist, and now my business today is Zander Media, that is, I don't know, substantially more interesting as a narrative arc. And so this 4-part is the setup. This is the world we find ourselves in. Bilbo Baggins is in the Shire. There's a change. Something new disrupts that norm. So Gandalf comes and brings Bilbo out of the Shire. There's a turning, the twist or the reveal, which is the one ring, right? Bilbo finds the ring. And then there's a resolution, which is the payoff or conclusion of the story. Eventually, Bilbo returns to the Shire. And so it's less about trying to fit a story to a framework and more looking at the stories we already tell, looking at the things that we're already doing and say, what here helps move the story that we have to tell or the coalition that we're trying to build into that little bit of excitement, into that little bit of a flow, into a start somewhere. There's something that happens that disrupts the norm. There's a surprise or a delight or a moment of aha. And then there's this resolution, this conclusion, this payoff.
Before we get back to the conversation, here's a quick word about People Leader Accelerator. HR leaders, the People Leader Accelerator is a 16-week program plus a lifetime community. Applications are open now at peopleleaderaccelerator.com. All right, back to our discussion.
I appreciate that there are so many frameworks to use, but that you've distilled it down into here's the 3 things. But oh, by the way, this twist is critical to making a story sticky.
Yep.
For HR leaders who are thinking about using storytelling within their organizations, What are some of the ways that they can decide what are the best ways to tell those stories? Because storytelling can take so many forms, they can have so many elements to it. How do you think about like what are the best mediums? What are the best forms of these stories?
Yeah, I have sort of two different directions to go with that. So I'll tackle both. The first is we will sometimes do employer brand videos, employer brand strategy, and then turn that into a video for HR departments or, enterprise companies at large. And what I always tell clients or potential clients at the beginning is your employer brand is not different than your brand. This should be a conversation between marketing and HR because people go and work at Nike because Nike has a really strong brand. People go and work at Apple because Apple has a really strong brand. They are known for who they are. They're known for who they're not. You don't go to Apple and say, but I would like to work remote because everybody knows Apple is generally an office first company. And so the more true and authentic an employer can be about who they are and also who they're not, who they're for and who they're not for, and more cleanly adhere to the ethos of the company itself, the more successful they will be at attracting the right people and retaining the right people. So that's at the meta level. At the micro level for an individual, it's just practice. There's no such thing as an inherently good storyteller or an inherently bad storyteller. I call it your founder story, but it can be the founder story for Andrew of starting PLA. It can be the founder story of your career. It doesn't have to be the founder of a startup. Is what are the 15 stories you can tell? And have you practiced them? And have you noticed that when you pause at that specific moment, like a comedian, people take an indrawn breath. This is a skill to practice, not something that you are inherently good at or bad at. It's just getting practice, getting reps in the same way that we would expect the recruiting arm of a company get reps at talking about how good that company is and why you should come and work for them.
I wonder if there's some specific, practical, tangible guidance that we could offer to some of our, HR listeners. You touched on employment branding, storytelling, and a partnership with marketing. And I'll share that I've taken a cynic's opinionated view on this in the past. And I've encouraged other HR leaders to make sure marketing stays away from, like make the graphics, they'll be beautiful, but don't let marketing take control of the internal messaging. That. Let's share a little bit more of the nuance of that. So I've got my perspective on it, but what's yours?
So marketing, whether we're trying to hire the right people, retain the right people, or attract the right customers, is a mix of what is authentically true to an organization and what is aspirationally true to the organization. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are lots of employees at Apple who work remote. And the folks I know at Apple who have been hired in the last 2 years have been required to go to HQ or to go to the office. So there's always exceptions. We're not only trying to attract one specific person or one type of person. I do think it should be a collaboration with marketing, but only if marketing is willing to take HR's lead, because HR has a much better sense of who they are trying to attract than a marketing arm that is only used to bringing in B2B customers at the enterprise level, right? They know nothing about attracting great employees. So then that's on them to learn. And the danger is because marketing often holds more power, especially around messaging, than HR does. I actually think HR leaders need to step up and say, we know who we are, both in actuality and in aspirational. And this is the kind of people we're trying to attract. And this is the story we want to tell. But the more I've gotten to know, I was just saying this to a friend who's a senior product guy at Asana, who I've known for probably 15 years. And we were reflecting on the higher up somebody gets within a large enterprise company, the more they become a politician and the more they become responsible for coalition building. That's actually a large part of the role of a leader in any company. At Robin's Café with 15 baristas, some of whom are full-time, some of whom are part-time, all the way to Intel with whatever it is, 90,000 employees around the world. And so, mobilizing people, building momentum. And it comes from recognizing the responsibility for not trying to do something alone. I mean, what you said of we both known lots of HR leaders whose ability to storytell was curtailed by the marketing department rather than say,
Yeah.
we know who we're trying to attract. Let's work with the people who do messaging all the time to figure out what the messages we want to tell about our organization to prospective employees.
As you think about ideal customer profile or ICP, your marketing team should have that really dialed in for your product or your service of your business. The ICP, though, of prospective workers at your company or current workers is probably a little outside their normal lane. It's like asking your general counsel that has done deals and contracts, employment law stuff. It's different. It's still legal stuff, but it's very different. So it's still marketing, but your ICP and your messaging and what you're going to talk about that's compelling to them is very different. And so HR should be much more closely attuned. And so that's where I come from when I say, like, hey, don't let marketing own your internal messaging. Sure, you can work with them, but we in HR should be much more attuned to what attracts, what retains, what helps build alignment and clarity. And often I find that a lot of our internal communications kind of default to tasteless vanilla, like something that appeals to everybody and is kind of corporate speak. And we all roll our eyes at words like synergy and, the corporate speak, happens a lot. And we can say a lot without actually saying anything. And so any type of internal messaging, I think, that's effective will be somewhat opinionated and repel just as much as it attracts if it's going to be effective, which is, a bit of a spicy take.
And I think that's true of marketing writ large outside of HR as well. I think my spicy take on marketing is every organization should be 30% more true to who they actually are, including the things they do poorly. There's a great book, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and the old version is better than the new. A mix of the truth of an organization or a deliverable, plus the aspirational truth, right? Not a lie, but we're trying to become this. Then all of a sudden it becomes compelling because join my company, we're going to become greater than we are now, right? It gives forward momentum.
Yeah, I think those opinions, the spiciness that we're adding here is that those opinions give it personality, and personality allows it to be sticky. And that stickiness then stays in our brains and we go, oh, that's why Apple has a reputation for being a certain way. Or, we connect the types of products with the culture of the company, with what it's like to work there. And I remember at Gusto, our CEO was really, really intentional about, I want it to feel consistent, whether a customer is using our product, calling into customer support or dealing with the salesperson or coming into one of our offices or getting interviewed. It should feel consistent. And while it's not identical, there is this translation that we're trying to do between the brand of the company and the employer brand of the company that should feel connected. They should not feel divorced. And I think that's where, yes, partner with marketing, but don't let them take over is this interesting balance. Both sides, I think, are trying to meet somewhere that feels connected ultimately.
We're all inundated with so much AI generated content now, whether video or written. Humans already have a very acute sense of what is inauthentic. And so in some ways, one of the only competitive advantages left, whether for an individual or a company, is be true to the truth of that organization or of that person.
I'm curious if we could follow that like AI thread for a moment too, of what are some of the signals that make, whether it's a video or a story, feel inauthentic, or like sort of those flags where you go, ooh, to a human that feels really AI generated?
I think about this in books and book publishing. I have another book proposal that I'm circulating right now. And in books, we're already seeing in the last couple of years a decrease of great books because there's so much content, because I can ask ChatGPT to write me a book in 10 minutes on any topic I could name. But what it can't do is the personalization. It can't tell you a really compelling story of why Lawrence of Arabia matters to me, or what it was like to grow into myself as a man through running Robin's Café. It's the personalness of my experience the story or the lesson learned, and then how it applies to you, or how it applies to our connection, or how it applies to our conversation. And so the books that I think are going to do well in the next 10 years are ones that have vulnerability, have personal story, and also have relevance to a specific reader. And so content, story, right? The story of your career, Jess, has the personal relevance, the relevance to me or to whoever you're talking to, and the outcome, the entertainment, the education, the where we're going together.
I appreciate that so much. And the vulnerability element, I'm curious about, is there a line at which you can be, as a leader, like too personal, too vulnerable, where it backfires? And how do you think about that balance between, yes, we want that authenticity and we want people to be able to connect with you, but when does it undermine you as a leader in that kind of, reversing it being a strength and suddenly becomes like, oh, does it ever get too vulnerable?
100%. I don't think I have all the answers on that. I just have my own personal experience. But you know who you clearly should have on the podcast? The title of her book is Be Yourself at Work, is the chief heart officer, the CHRO at VaynerMedia, Claude Silver. But I will answer fairly vulnerably with a couple of like personal anecdotes. I remember at Robin's Cafe, maybe once a month, we would do like a bowling night. There's a bowling alley across the street from the cafe, and they were friends, so they would host us. And we would do some like training with my baristas after the cafe closed and then go across the street. And I don't remember what I was talking about to 7 or 8 employees who were there, but I was giving kind of an inspirational couple of minute speech about the purpose. And then we were going to do some training. And one of my employees at the end of the speech wasn't particularly bought in and said something kind of like snide and just like, I don't agree. Not kindly, but not offensively. I was like, here we are, and here we're doing this thing. And then he was like, no, you're wrong. And I just completely deflated. Flash forward to Zander Media, I had full-time employees with healthcare benefits, running a media agency with the margins being very different and the salaries being very, very different than food service. And sort of in 21 and 22, I started to have a couple of different challenges with employees. We hired, I think, 10 people over the course of a year, all full-time, based on just the work that Zander Media was doing. A couple of those were not good fit hires. They came from large enterprise companies and expected sort of the benefits that they would get at a thousands of person company. One of them left after a very short period of time, and there was a lot of challenge around the departure. I was talking to Jo Dennis, who's the former CHRO of Pinterest, who was a neighbor of mine at the time. I'd walk by her house on my daily run, and we would catch up, and I was sharing some of these challenges. She was like, oh, is this your first challenge of that kind? Like, is this the first time you've had a disgruntled employee leave and then there's continued kerfuffle around it? Like, I remember my first time too. That's very sweet. Because at Pinterest, like when you get to a certain size, there become conflict. And I just didn't know at Robin's Cafe when I'm like doing my best to be an inspirational leader that someone's going to disagree, or doing my best to hire great people and to treat them. I mean, the first time at Zander Media, we got employees healthcare. I was like, I've made it. And I talked to my colleague to this day, Jonathan, a year after we got everyone healthcare. And he was like, Robin, this is like really not great healthcare benefits. You know, this is good enough for now. And then hopefully it'll continue to improve, right? There are these moments of like, I'm trying, setback, trying and setback. And then you get someone like Jo saying, actually, Robin, like, I have empathy for your setback, but like, that just means you've reached the next level. I've heard business leaders say, like, until you've gotten sued, you know, you're not even becoming successful. The Paul Farmer quote, there's this Haitian quote that he quotes that is mountains beyond mountains, meaning like beyond the mountain you're climbing, there are always bigger mountains to climb. And I just think about that with entrepreneurship or with climbing an executive ladder or building a company of any kind. There's always hurdles. And the ones that we tackle right now will help us be better at the ones that are coming next.
Robin, I wonder if there's a lesson to be learned. We've had a number of conversations with, guests on this podcast about how HR leaders can be more successful. Part of that is about being more business oriented. Part of that is knowing how to show up in a room of your I'm going to put air quotes up, air quote, peers on the executive team. And this might be more about executive communication rather than storytelling, but take this whatever direction that you want. Often the HR leader is the youngest, is the earliest in their career, might be the only or one of the only females, might be the only or one of the only members of a different demographic group around a table of the executive team. And there is this feeling of anxiousness showing up within that peer group. I'm curious, given the conversation that we just had about the mountain after the mountain, like, congratulations, you're now at the executive table, and it doesn't feel great. And there's some challenges that you're facing. From your perspective of communications and storytelling, what advice would you have to HR leaders that find themselves in that situation? How can they be most successful?
I mean, I'm still thinking about your question, how authentic is too authentic to be at work? And based on the title of her book, which I love Claude dearly, I haven't read her book yet, Be Yourself at Work is her advice. I'm thinking about another CPO of Athena, who I think, Andrew,
Melanie.
Melanie. Yeah, we had,
and her
we had
spicy
this
take was just exactly the opposite, right? Don't be yourself. Don't bring your whole self to work. Only bring parts of yourself to
and
work.
I would love, maybe we'll try and organize this at the next responsive conference. Melanie and Claude having that debate would be like the best in the world. And to be very clear, I'm not a woman. I'm not an HR professional. I'm not at that executive table for the first time in that position. So I really don't know. It's not an experience I've had. But Melanie is short. She is feisty. She has come up in HR. She is unafraid to have spicy takes on the internet. She was on stage in 2024, my annual responsive conference, my conference about the future of work. And she puts opinions out there on the internet that are spicy. And I've also seen her acknowledge quite authentically and humbly when she changes her mind about something or is proven wrong. So there's a willingness to take risks. I actually think that almost any circumstance can be turned into a competitive advantage. So if I'm coming to the boardroom or coming to the executive table for the first time, I'm going to say, hey, look, I've never done this before and I'm a little intimidated. And I know that I could be great. So please give me feedback. But also, like, I'm here until I'm no longer welcome at this table. I'm going to try to make my voice heard.
I'm hearing authenticity there. I'm hearing own it, name it. This feels weird, gang, and I'm doing my best and, be a great teammate. Like, help us all do this well.
I'm not one to say that there's not consequences to that. At Responsive Conference 2017, Simon Loudon was the global CMO of PepsiCo at the time. And somebody during the Q&A raised his hand from the audience and said, this sounds great. And I love that you're on stage with your direct report talking about org change. I'm at an enterprise company in the world, and my boss's boss doesn't want change for our organization. I'm bought in to building a more resilient organization, building a more inclusive organization, whatever the pieces were. But 2 levels up, they don't want to. What should I do? And I'll just never forget. Simon said, you quit and you go find somewhere else that wants you more. If I'm an HR executive coming to the executive table for the first time and they say, to hell with this, we don't believe that HR should be in a position of power, I think that's probably the wrong company and their loss. And it's a fairly privileged place to be able to say, okay, then quit. But I've never found that tilting at windmills and trying to change people who don't want to change is useful. The advice BJ Fogg gave me years ago is find the people who already want what you have to offer and then just show them how.
Wow. I mean, that's something to really think about. As Beth Steinberg, who's CPO at Chime, says, like, you sometimes just need to know when to put your badge down and walk away. And when is it a place where it really is challenging some fundamental truths that you have about yourself, being challenged in a way that you need to. And when is it something where it's like, maybe I can make change, maybe I can convince them of something else and to keep going at it. And I think that is a fine line and something that gets explored quite a bit in our profession, because we get challenged a lot in this profession of like, what do I believe in? And do I believe the way that this company is doing it? I know we have precious little time with you, and I want to be able to get to our accelerator round. I was just going to ask for one last question, which is any quick tips for HR pros who are trying to embed stories or storytelling more into their day-to-day? You mentioned practice. What are a couple of quick tips on the best ways to practice getting better at storytelling?
Sure. It's fun because I still feel like that 8-year-old boy who was like very shyly bringing his peers to watch Lawrence of Arabia at my birthday party. I am often the loudest in the room I'm in. I'm always the most enthusiastic in any room I walk into, right? I'm never short energy. And at 8 years old and even at 18 years old, that was not true. So it would be easy to see Robin Zander today and say, oh, well, easy for you to say. And to be fair, I'm a white man in America. I've got a lot of things going for me. But I was a very shy kid. I was so hesitant to speak up. And it has been the practice of 2 decades and deliberate practice to become the entrepreneur I am, to be able to sit in boardrooms and have conversations at an executive level and do so comfortably. We've talked story framework. We've talked about practice, affect. I actually think that just being enthusiastic is a competitive advantage. Everyone likes being around somebody who is positive. Practicing the specific of your stories, practicing the specific of your pitch, choosing what story to tell, and not telling a story for the first time when the stakes are high. The tempo of a story. If I'm telling the Steve Jobs story, right, I stood up and I'm like my jean pocket. There's a pacing that matters a lot. When I speak more slowly, it's clear there's some significance to what I have to say. There's so many pieces of what I guess we could just call as executive presence. And even just by practicing those and getting incrementally better and not comparing yourself to the best in the world, but compared to who you were yesterday. There's a Mr. Beast, Jimmy Donaldson quote that I like a lot. He says, if I look back on the video that we produced 2 weeks ago and I'm not ashamed, I'm not growing fast enough. I publish a weekly newsletter called Snafu about reluctant sales. And when I look back 3 months ago, I'm like, okay, I would write that very differently today, right? It's not exactly shame, but like I've improved as a writer from 3 months ago. And for all of us in our executive presence, in our storytelling, in our ability to sell, are you getting better? Is this important enough that you are practicing this deliberately, that you're getting better in whatever facet so that you can become more of the executive, of the leader that you want to do? And it doesn't have to be practice at work. I'm practicing, this is a little more nuanced, but I'm practicing Darija, which is Moroccan Arabic, with my dog. I'm not comfortable enough speaking Darija that I'm practicing it with humans, but I'm practicing it with my dog. If we are practicing storytelling, can we practice it in conversations with family? Ones that's been the hardest for me to learn is not trying to get people to do things that they don't want to do. I practice that with my family every day. It is so tempting to try to persuade one of my parents to do something that they have said specifically they don't want to do, and instead to acknowledge the reality of that. So these are life skills that happen to be applicable at work, and practicing them in whatever context they occur so that when push comes to shove, when the stakes are high, you are prepared.
You've dropped a lot of names. You've shared a lot of quotes. Where do you learn from? And most specifically, what sources would you recommend for our audience to learn from?
The thing I think about learning is follow a thread. If one name has come up today that's of interest, go research that person or that book or that idea, and then go follow the leads from there. I mean, literally right here, I have a biography of P.T. Barnum, of Barnum and Bailey Circus that I'm reading right now. And I'm learning about the 1850s as an era and the era that he started sort of long before he was known for the circus. So it's whatever is of interest to you that you are interested in and go from there. I write a weekly newsletter about sales and persuasion. You can find that at joinsnafu.com, snafu, snafu.com. But for whatever elements of persuasion and storytelling in HR or at an executive level, it's find the things you're interested in and take the next step.
I know you've called out that you're not an HR practitioner, but boy, you have been a part of this HR tech and high growth community in a big way for a long time. Would love to get your advice for how you might suggest our audience, our listeners, could accelerate their careers in today's environment.
Always keep learning.
Ties right back into find out what you're interested in and press the gas pedal. I love it. You've mentioned the Responsive Conference, Zander Media, your newsletter, Snafu. Are there any other ways that you would recommend that our listeners get in touch with you?
I think that's the majority. Yeah, I run an annual conference about the future of work, and the weekly newsletter are probably the best ways to keep track.
Awesome. Robin, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of your insights and wisdom about storytelling. It was wonderful to get to know you and share that with our listeners.
Likewise, such a pleasure, Jess and Andrew, and congratulations on this podcast. You've got such an incredible network and so many ideas and resources to share. So I'm so excited that you're doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of People Leader Accelerator Podcast, where we talk with business and HR leaders about what makes great leadership and great work. We hope you walked away with at least one game-changing insight for you and your team. You can find show notes and free bonus resources at peopleleaderaccelerator.com/podcast. If today's conversation sparked something for you, hit subscribe, leave a quick review, and share this episode with that one colleague who really needs to hear it. You know who I'm talking about. And if you're currently navigating the tricky waters of hiring top talent, developing leaders who actually lead, or building a culture that fuels growth, let's talk. You can find us at peopleleaderaccelerator.com. We're here to help you and your team not just survive, but truly thrive. I'm Jess Yuen, and on behalf of my co-host, Andrew Bartlow, thanks for investing your valuable time with us. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, keep learning and keep leading.